Hello, I'm Cyndi Brannon, and welcome to this episode of the Keeping Her Keys podcast. In this episode, I'm talking all about altars, those magical, medicinal, mystical, built sacred spaces that we create to awaken the sacredness within us and to connect to the deeper world. So, welcome to this episode of the Keeping Her Keys podcast. If you read my blog, have my books, or you're a member of the Keeping Her Keys Coven, you're going to know that I love my altars. I love creating altars. In my books, Keeping Her Keys, True Magic, and the forthcoming Entering Hecate's Garden, I talk a lot about altars. This episode is just diving more into how to make altars, and I'm specifically going to be getting into how to set up a complete altar of Hekate. So let's begin by talking a little bit about what an altar is. And one of the things I've noticed over the years that I've been teaching, goddess-based spiritual witchcraft, is that so many of us are intuitively creating altars. We've been creating altars our whole lives without even consciously being aware that we are creating these little built sacred spaces. So if you think you've never created an altar, after you listen to this podcast, go around your home, look in your room, and see if you already have collections of objects that are sacred to you. You know, it can be pictures and how you've arranged certain pictures, things that have really powerful memories to you, little piles of rocks and crystals, little trinkets that are arranged a very certain way. And sometimes they celebrate, magical things, and sometimes they celebrate the things that are magical to us. Very personal. It can be, tickets to concerts that you had a fantastic time at, and you might have like a little space set up remembering all of those. Or you may have like a celebrity that you really identify with, and you may already have like a little shrine set up to them. These are all amazing altars that we create without knowing. And I'm going to tell you why I think this is. I think it is because as witches, as magical beings, as, deeply connected and dialed in to the deeper world, we have this innate ability to create sacred space. And even before we start consciously trying to build sacred space, that sacredness that is within us pours out, and it pours out into these altars that we create without even thinking about it. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about intentionally creating altars. But I do strongly recommend that you look around your home after listening to the episode and see the altars that you've created, perhaps without even knowing. There are so many ways to create altars, and there are so many reasons to create altars. There are so many types of altars. We can have altars to a specific deity, such as Hekate, which I'll be talking about how to create a full Hecatean altar in a bit. Crystal grids are another example. Moon altars. Altars to tarot cards that we love. Altars to plant spirits that we love. Ancestor altars, of course. And altars can be focused to a specific purpose. And we often call those altars working altars. Altars that are specifically for ancestors, spirits, goddesses, what we would call higher order spirits. So you could, if you have like an angelic altar, or if you have like, a little image of a certain angel with a candle and crystals beside it, those are what we could call shrines. So shrines are very specific to certain identifiable entities, and the purpose of that altar is to honor that spirit, that entity, that goddess, that angel, whoever it is, ancestors. That's a shrine because it has a focus on a specific spirit, entity, or even person. It's a shrine. And usually that kind of altar, which we sometimes call a devotional or an honorific altar, that kind, I'm going to use the term shrine just to delineate shrine as a special type of altar. So shrines are usually where we would go to perform petitions or prayers, or to spend time communicating and connecting with that spirit. That is the focus for that altar. So that's really the first question to ask yourself when you want to create an altar is, why are you creating it? What is your purpose? What is the goal, and what is your intention? And you may already ask yourself this next question when you're saying why, if it's like about a specific spirit. So the next question to ask yourself is who? Who do you want involved in your altar? If it's an ancestor altar, what ancestors do you want in your altar? If it is some type of working altar, like a healing altar, who do you want in your altar that will help you to create that just abundantly flowing healing energy? Who? Certain deities, certain spirits, ancestors. Again, who would you like to have in your altar? The next question to ask yourself is what? What are you going to put in your altar to support the who? Support the spirits. You don't always have to have an altar that is focused on an individual or a collection of spirits or deities. You can just start with a what if you want to. So what are spirits that are associated with things like crystals and plants, animal spirits, those kinds of symbols, keys, wheels, other charms, skulls. Those are what we call correspondences. So correspondences amplify the magic and medicine of your altar because they have certain energetic properties. And sometimes we choose those objects purely on intuition or personal meaning. Something may have a great meaning to me. I mentioned concert tickets earlier. So if you have a concert ticket to you that was just like the best event of your life, and you want to create an altar to activate joy within your life, then that would be a what that you could put on your altar, because that for you is a correspondence of joy. And this brings me to another point that I wanted to mention, because it is really integral to creating altars that are powerful portals of energy, is the idea of altars as a form of what's known as sympathetic magic. Sympathetic magic is the practice of using objects to connect with magical and mystical forces. An icon of Hekate is a form of sympathetic magic because it is tethered to her energy. And, we go through processes to activate that icon and so on. So an altar is sympathetic magic in that whatever you put on that altar, that is a symbol of something greater than it. Concert ticket, icon of Hekate, symbols of the elements. Fire as, a representation of fire. Whatever you use that is a representation of a deeper, more powerful meaning. The experience of joy that is evoked by looking at that object, whatever it may be. The next question you want to ask yourself is, where are you going to put this altar? And this is really about what the altar is going to do. So sometimes altars are energetic hubs, like a power center, that we want to emanate energy all the time. I have the Keeping Her Keys altar that's in, my office/temple that emanates energy to me and the work of Keeping Her Keys, all of my followers and coven members and students. That altar is always emanating energy, and I work with that altar every day. So that altar sits right in my office/temple and is, just pouring out that abundant energy every day to everyone who is involved with Keeping Her Keys. That is, so it's close to me, so I can tend to it. It's close to the work of Keeping Her Keys, and so the location of that altar is crucial to its efficacy. The more that altar is attuned to the vibrational essence of Keeping Her Keys, which of course is largely associated with the computer and, me writing and, all of my plants and my apothecary. So that's why that altar is here with me, because it is like an energy source that I go to, like if you had solar panels in your house, you would make sure the solar panels are working. And then they continue to throw off energy. And like solar panels, that altar is drawing in a greater energy from Hekate, from the plant spirits, from the crystals, from feather, wand, blade, that are all involved in that altar. You may want to have a contained altar. You may want it to be an altar that isn't always kind of just abundantly flowing. You want to just have a power source that you can open up for specific reasons at specific times. That's part of asking where, because if it is an altar you want contained, it's easier if you can put it in a more isolated location, so it can just kind of be almost like encapsulated, and no one is going to be interfering with that altar. Another consideration is whether or not you want that altar to be private, to be just for you. In my bedroom, I keep a shrine to Isis as part of an altar, a personal altar, a self-care altar on top of my dresser in my room. And, that's just for me. That energy flows abundantly and freely, but only in my bedroom. And then we have like a communal family altar that has masculine energy in it, Hecatean energy in it, and seasonal energies in it. That's in like the heart of the home. And that's always, again, it's not contained. It's just flowing through the home, protecting the home, keeping the home strong, helping us all to be healthy and whole. given different circumstances, you may not be able to have like a communal altar. You may not want an altar like in the heart of the home. You may need the altar in your bedroom. Um, and that, like looking at like the energies in the home. An altar is a corrective. So, you can place an altar. An altar doesn't have to be obvious. An altar can be very it can look to someone who is not familiar with magic. It can look to them just like a collection of really cool objects with a candle and maybe some bay leaves or something. They don't need to know, that this is an altar to the goddess, for example. So, consider that whether you want the altar contained or if you want it open, if you want it in a communal space or a private space. And another aspect is height. So do you want it low to the ground, more underworld energy, middle height, more middle world, everyday life energy, or up high, which is like starry road, the heights. If you had like an astrological altar, you might want to put that up high if you're working with certain planets, for example. And it's great to have altars like in your children's room, in your kitchen, on your windowsills. And again, thinking about you can have different altars in different locations that are serving different purposes. When is a great consideration for activating altars? It is fabulous to plan your altar, to develop your altar, and then do it as your new moon ritual or your full moon ritual, and to just stand there and just connect to the lunar spirits and just allow them to pour through you, and then just direct them into your altar, enchanting it and enlivening it so it becomes like a true power center. If you are into astrology, you can add more kind of correspondences from the planets and stars about the timing of your altar. And then there are also, seasonal altars and altars associated with the Sabbats. So a Samhain altar, a Beltane altar, a summer solstice altar. All of those are considerations about when you might want to create that altar. And that also kind of guides you back to the earlier questions, about who and who and what. And the last question is how. And I've briefly mentioned, like about enlivening your altar with lunar energies or planetary energies. That's one methodology. So how is your method? How is all about how are you going to take this beautiful collection of objects and bring them all together in a synergistic manner. In the Keeping Her Keys book, I talk about this, and in the Coven and in the courses I teach, we also talk more about this process of what's known as vivification, that the altar becomes vivified. It becomes a living, breathing spirit portal that has so much energy, and that when you connect with that altar, you are instantly being able to connect to the focus of the altar. The altar becomes the anima loci, or the spirit location, the soul location for whatever you are connecting with. It is that tether to those deeper forces. And this connection works, on a spiritual level, and it also works on our physical cells as well. So in particular, if we have plants and crystals on the altar, they, like us, we vibrate very similarly. They will immediately start to, once we vivify them and give them the instructions that, this is an altar and I'm bringing all of the forces and symbols and correspondences together. This is the point of my altar. they will start to pour their medicine out and release it actually like into the air of the corporeal world, just like they release it into the air of the etheric world. And, that will strengthen you. And, if you put fennel in your altar, once you do that ritual of vivification, that fennel will start to release its essence into the corporeal air around you. And, for example, communication will be enhanced. Your breathing will start to ease and so on. So there's a lot to consider when you're focusing on the how that your altar will become vivified. The most fundamental technique is to lovingly and sincerely cleanse and prepare your objects. And then as you arrange them, just concentrate your attention on what you are creating. Talk to and connect with, the crystals. If you've got black obsidian that you want for grounding and protection on your altar, for example, then talk to the black obsidian and say, I'm adding you to this altar. You are part of this greater creation, and I'm asking you to contribute your powers of protection and purification and grounding, so that when I touch you, you'll be a touchstone for me, and all I have to do is touch you and you'll help me calm down. And the same thing like with a blade, like talk to your blade, and the blade is, I'm putting you here because you represent the underworld and the lifeblood and the ability to create and destroy, and I'm asking you to become part of this altar, and that when I work with you, you bless my magic and vivify the energy of creation and destruction and the ability to cut cords, cut ties, and so on. So as you're adding each object, each symbol, and icons to the goddess to your altar, you're having this conversation. And then when it's all done, it's great to have written like a little ritual of your own that say, I vivify this altar for the purpose of whatever your purpose is. And then you list off all of the components and say, bless me as I bless you. So to the blade, I bless you. Bless me as I bless you. To the obsidian, bless me as I bless you. To the anointing oil, bless me as I bless you. To the spirits of mugwort, bless me as I bless you. And then at the end of it, you just say something like, and now, with my powerful hands and my heart and my soul, I blend all of you together, mixing you in to a beautiful altar that brings the blessing of whatever it is you want the blessing to be for that altar. Light your candles once you're done this vivification process. If you've got an anointing oil, you can anoint the objects on it, anoint yourself to attune your energy to it. If offerings are part of what you're doing, you set the offerings down now, present them to the spirits of your altar, and then partake of it. Again, that's about, attuning your energy. So whatever it is that you're putting on the altar, go through this process of blessing it. And again, with the anointing oil, you could use moon water. And of course, then the sacred smoke is the final touch for blessing the altar. Mugwort is always phenomenal for doing this. Juniper is excellent as a cleanser. So if you have a space that you want to there's a little bit of miasma, there's a little bit of gunk, start with the juniper. And then if you want to use the juniper just to bless it at the end, just let the juniper know that it's being used as a blessing, because juniper loves to banish things. So you don't want to unintentionally, kind of shut down your altar. Lavender is another amazing all-purpose one. Thyme is excellent for sacred smoke. Those are all really great examples of sacred smoke that you can use. So now let's get into how to create an altar of Hekate. There are so many things that you can put into an altar of Hekate. And in the Keeping Her Keys book, you can find other tips that I'm not going to discuss in the next few minutes. To create an altar of Hekate, the number one thing that you should have is some kind of icon of Hekate, a statue, an illustration, an image, something that really powerfully connects you on a deep soulful level that really awakens the Hekate within you, whatever that may be. It doesn't need to be fancy. You can make a collage of images that you find online and, just put it on some poster board. It doesn't need to cost you anything. It is an icon, and that icon should be anointed with some kind of oil and blessed with sacred smoke, and you should talk to Hekate and to activate and vivify that icon, and that really should go on the altar first. And there is one thing, sorry, I forgot to mention that, like, I started at number 1. I forgot to mention number 0. So let's go back to number 0. Number 0 is not a thing, of course, but the foundation of the altar. So before you get that icon of Hekate on your altar, what are you going to put her on? What are you going to build this altar on? Generally speaking, you're going to want to have an altar cloth, an altar cover, whether it's tile, some kind of foundation for your altar that sort of separates it from the physical built environment that's around it. It's like you're laying the groundwork to say this is sacred space. Now, of course, the altar you're creating will, if it's not contained, if it's an open altar, it will interact with everything around it. But that foundation, whether it's a cloth or some tiles, piece of wood, whatever, a placemat. Placemats are great for smaller altars. That is the first step. So whatever your foundation is, make sure it's clean. Clean the surface that it's going on first. You can use different things to do that. I really like Circe's filter, which is in Entering Hecate's Garden in that book. It's a really good kind of cleaning potion for sacred cleaning. So clean off your area, put your foundation down. You can at this point, spray or anoint your foundation, whatever you want to do at that point, and then you put your icon of Hekate on the top of it. Anoint her with your oil, and it can be just high quality olive oil or a little bit like a lavender essential oil. You can pick an oil that really speaks true to you. Put her down, and that is the number one thing. Like to have some kind of foundation and then an icon of Hekate. That's your basic Hecatean altar. The second thing I highly recommend that you need in the altar are candles or some kind of fire source. Hekate, of course, is so associated with fire. She is anima mundi, which is the fire of the world, the fiery soul of the world. So you want that fire. The fire symbolizes those torches, and that's why, in ancient depictions of her and modern ones, like she has these torches, but to the ancients, her twin torches really represented not only like guidance through this journey of life, but also that she was the fire of the world, and that she could walk through all the worlds. So you really want to have some kind of candles or fire. If you need to use battery operated ones, that's fine. Electricity is still fire. So that's the second thing. So If you've got your foundation, your number 0, your icon and your candles, that is like a fabulous altar. You can totally work with that and connect to Hekate just like that. The third thing I'm going to recommend are some symbols of Hekate, like keys, Hecate's wheel, the strophalos, other symbols of her that really speak to you. Add those at this point as well. So that's the third thing. Symbols are really important because symbols are sympathetic magic and will amplify Hecate's presence within your altar. Now, the next thing, the fourth thing that I think, so if you got to 1 to 3, you've got a fantastic altar. I'm really going to say you need something to kind of not only initially activate the altar, but also for altar maintenance, and also just to help you when you stand before the altar to do your daily practice, to get, to activate that connection you have to the altar and the deeper world. So anointing oil, like I said, it can be simple as olive oil. You can take an essential oil that is good for your skin, safe for your skin, and dilute it with olive oil. You can read more about this in the Entering Hecate's Garden book. I get into it in a little bit in the Keeping Her Keys book, and certainly in different rituals like my death walking oil that you can find online just by Googling it, or the sovereignty oil, which is out and about in the internet that you can find too. So you want some kind of anointing oil that anoints the objects on the altar and also yourself. So anointing oil would be the fourth thing I would say that you should definitely have on your altar. The fifth thing, so the top 5 are things that I'm like, these are must-haves. And then the other things I'm going to talk about, it's like, those are great to have, but you don't. So 0 to 5, because you need your foundation. So the fifth thing is some kind of sacred adornment for yourself. So this can be a necklace, a charm. In the Keeping Her Keys system, in the Mistai, which is the advanced program for Hekate and witchcraft, we work with croquis, which are ancient bracelets. Well, the bracelets aren't ancient. They're based on the practices of her ancient witch priestesses. So some type of sacred adornment. The bracelet is worn on the left hand, or you can use a necklace, a cingulum, a belt. If you're more into belts, you could use something like that. And that should be kept on your altar of Hekate at all times, so it further connects and attunes to her energy. Now, the sixth thing, and I put this at number 6, which may be a bit of a talking point. You may have some thoughts about this. Number 6, I put offerings. So like a nice platter where you can leave offerings to Hekate, and you can, if they're food offerings, you can imbibe them, you can consume them yourself. Again, all in this attunement process of awakening Hekate within you. Offerings are not like having a platter with food offerings or botanical offerings or whatever you're offering her. It's not like a prerequisite for an altar of Hekate, because the altar itself is an offering. Creating the altar, your sincere appreciation and connection to Hekate is an offering. It is nice, and I often do this. I have a platter, and I will make special treats, and I'll do my ritual, spend time with the altar, and then I'll have like tea with Hekate, for example, and just really welcome her in and open myself up to her visions and messages. And there are a lot of great recipes in Entering Hecate's Garden as well. There's everything in that book, so you can create a complete Hecate's feast. So that is a great resource if you want to get more into making like some really elaborate offerings in the kitchen. The next item I would say to have, number 7, is what we're up to. Number 7 is to have some kind of smoke, sacred smoke. So have some kind of censer. So a censer is simply some kind of vessel that is safe to burn botanicals on or burn incense on. So your censer, you might use a diffuser, for example, instead of a censer. So it's something that you create sacred smoke, whether it's smoke from burning something or if it's like vapor that you create through your diffuser, that it is about changing the chemical, the electrochemical atmosphere of the corporeal environment, and also working in the electrochemical spiritual environment too, because plants like us, we're in the world of form and force, and we always have that duality, that that like we live in two locations. So some kind of sacred smoke is great to have, and you can use that for blessings. So that's number 7. We are up to the next one, number 8. So number 8, I've put it number 8, some kind of libation, some kind of representation of the element of water, and the watery aspects of the underworld. So a chalice, a bowl with moon water, regular water, maybe wine, something that is representative of water, which also like represents the element, of course, but water also represents the womb and the waters of the womb and Hecate's cave. So fire is the ignition, the spark, and water is the womb and the place where it becomes, where we become washed clean, where we become reborn. So I recommend some kind of sacred water. And that takes us up to number 9. So I'm going to now talk about a few of the tools you can have on your altar. So number 9, I put some kind of feather. It can be a found feather. Feathers are really great for connecting to the upper world, Hekate in her more mystical aspects. And feathers are great for helping to spread your sacred smoke or your sacred vapor. So feathers are fantastic and, represent the element of air. A well-constructed altar will always have representations of the 4 elements in it, because each of those are like the absolute foundations. And along with the 3 worlds, they are the sacred 7. And that those are the 7 most primal, most foundational energy sources that there are, and everything else is comprised of varying degrees of them. And where Hekate is the anima mundi, who wears the 7-rayed crown of the sacred 7, when we set up the altar and we have the 4 elements and representations of the 3 worlds, then we are fully activating her presence in all ways possible. So number 9 is the feather. Number 10 is the blade. And this can be any type of blade. It can be a blade that you use all the time. It can be a blade that you use for creating sacred space. It can be anything you want that represents that sharpness, that sharp edge. So blades are interesting. Sometimes they're associated with the element of air, such as with the Queen of Swords. Sometimes they are represented with fire, and sometimes they go with earth. So blades can be really kind of amenable to different elemental undertones, and generally they are associated with like underworld energy, in the sense that blades have, the power of life and death. And so like the underworld is one aspect of the womb, right? It's the dry aspect of the womb, if you want to, if we're kind of untangling the underworld a bit. So the blade is also really associated with the womb and the underworld, and Hecate in ancient statues often is depicted having a blade. And what historians believe this blade was about was to symbolize the underworld, the womb, and midwifery and childbirth. So it's a very specific type of blade. It's not a big sword. It's a blade that was used by the ancients for midwifery. So that is why the blade is really for Hecate associated with, birth, rebirth, because of this really strong current she has, in terms of like helping women bring children into the world and protecting them and guiding them. And the blade was often necessary in childbirth, to perform surgical procedures and to cut the cord and so on. It was a very nourishing, life-giving force, the blade. Number 11 is the wand. So wands are typically associated with fire. They can also be very great for summoning the energy of the middle world. So using a wand to help with material manifestations. So you can have a wand on there to represent middle world Hecate, like Enodia, who is so involved with helping us along our journey, like our earthly journey. So it's a very good tool for helping us to manifest new jobs, more money, new cars, more homes. Wands are really great to have on the altar and to work with in that way. And they are another representation of Hecate's sacred fires. So that's feather, blade, and wand. 3 tools that you can use in different ways. Keep them on your altar to keep them, enchanted, keep them vivified, and then you can use them in your spells and rituals. Now, if you want to really complete your altar, I've got some final things that you can add. So number 12 is adding the plant spirits. So Hecate, of course, has been for thousands of years really associated with the green world. And Hecate's garden actually predates, the Christian mythology around the Garden of Eden. And that comes to us from different myths who reference Hecate's garden as this like magical hub of the world. So plants, in entering Hecate's garden, I have 39 different plant spirits that you can use to summon Hecate. Mugwort, sage, if you're into sage. Bay is a fabulous one. And fresh flowers, to put around the statue or the icon and make beautiful arrangements. Hecate, of course, is really associated with poisons. So if you grow poisons like I do, I love to put aconite and foxglove and the other poisons, have fresh clippings at this time of the year when they're growing abundantly. Roses, of course, are very sacred to Hecate too. So that is another great, it's an offering. It's bringing in plant spirits. So, you can intuitively connect to these plant spirits and let them know what you're doing with your altar. And you can study, like in, books like in Entering Hecate's Garden, the Master Book of Herbalism, and other sources. You can study their standard properties and really, add those elements, add those considerations, those energies, the personalities of the plants to your altar. Number 13 is very similar. It's adding crystals and stones. So obsidian is very Hecatean. Red jasper is also Hecatean. And you can add other crystals and stones. Amethyst is great for sovereignty. Pink quartz or rose quartz for love. self-love, agape love, which is like the essence of Hecate as a world soul, is this agape love. This love that is all things. Her will is for us to grow and be healthy and whole. So rose quartz is great to amplify that energy. And just a couple of more things. It's really fantastic to add crossroads energy to your altar. So it can be like a little dish of dirt from a crossroads, or you can create a crossroads by crossing, 3 sticks or three pieces of twine or yarn or something to create the energy of the crossroads. So that's number 14. And number 15, just something I always like to have on my altar, is a little bit of salt. Salt is really fantastic. It's super grounding. It's super banishing. It's super protective. And, like when you're doing your daily ritual, or if it's a more elaborate ceremony that you're doing, if you kind of feel like, you're losing focus, or there's just a little bit of gunk stuck to you, just picking up some of that salt and rubbing it in your hands before you use your anointing oil. It's really cleansing. Sometimes, you've probably experienced this, like you wash up before a ritual and you're still like kind of gunky. So I just like having a little bit of salt. Salt also is evocative, sea salt. It's evocative of Hecate and Nalia, Hecate of the sea. So it's associated with the underworld and the chthonic aspects of Hecate as well. One final note I want to make is that the height of the altar is also very, very important in terms of you being how you interact with it and how Hecate will present herself through your altar. So chthonic altars are the most traditional, are the ancient system for altars to Hecate. They are low to the ground. Chthonic altars are really about the womb, the mother, the depths. And I've mentioned middle world attributes before, so those would be like anodic altars, Hecate anodia altars, more mid-height, and then astrodic, where upper world Hecate altars would be higher up. So you can kind of play with that. A couple of other considerations, again, would be like to include numbers. So Hecate, of course, is associated with 3 and multipliers of 3. So you may want to have 3 of this, 3 of that. For example, 3 keys, 3 candles, and so on. The number 13 is, again, it is 3 represented differently, and is also a prime number, and that's another great number to work with. 5 is also a good number, as is 7. Those are really fantastic numbers to work with. I've come up with 15 items for this complete altar if you want to go full tilt and have this amazing space. And so 15, of course, is 3 times 5. So it's representing 2 very different magical numbers. So that's good to think of. Colors. So black, red, and white are the Hecatean colors, from ancient times. So you may want to have those. Purple is great for sovereignty work. And of course, green for Hecate of the green world and Hecate's garden. So lots of different considerations in how to build your altar. And I'll just quickly finish up by going over the 15 items in order. So number 1 thing you want to have on your altar is an icon of Hecate. The number 2 thing is you want to have her hero spear, the sacred flame of Hecate, and that will evoke energies from her and awaken your own sacredness when you light them and when you study the flame and allow the energy to come. You can dress the candles, vivify. There's lots you can do with those candles. Number 3 would be to have symbols of Hecate. Number 4 is some kind of anointing oil or water or spray. Number 5 is your own sacred adornment. Number 6 are offerings and the platter that they go on. Number 7 is a censer with sacred smoke. Number 8 is a chalice or bowl for some form of liquid like moon water. Number 9, a feather. Number 10, a blade. Number 11, a wand. Number 12, botanicals. Number 13, crystals and stones. Number 14, crossroads energy. And number 15 is a bit of salt. So thank you for listening to this guide to creating altars and how to create a really powerful altar of Hekate. If you are interested in learning more about my work, you can head to keepingherkeys.com, and there you'll find my blog and videos and how you can join the Keeping Her Keys Coven